me what you think their life is going to be. And they went out into the slums of Brooklyn, and they went out there, and they started looking around and things. And every time they would come out, almost every child, barring 5 or 6 out of 200, they came back with, they don't have a chance. They don't have a chance. Well, another professor, 30 years later, in the 80s, found this study. And he said, I'd like to go and try to find these names and find, many of them still lived around the area. So he went and he found them. He found that 180 of the 200 were still around the area nearby, but over 100 were doctors and lawyers and all types of good things. And he said, my goodness, he said, how did this happen? Almost all of those 100 said there was one teacher in particular. One teacher in particular. I had a teacher, Michael Simpson. Maybe you had a teacher that would come to you and say, there's something about you. I had a teacher in college, too, that came and said, you need to write, Ryan. I had never had anybody tell me anything like that. But this one teacher, so he found she was still alive. He went and he found her and he said, what was it you did that makes 100 out of 2? These kids were expected to be at the worst of the worst. They were expected to fall apart, not have a life. What was it? She said, all I did, I simply loved them. I simply loved them. Folks, we're living in a world, we need to pray for these teachers. It's hard when kids come in and they throw expletives and they can cuss out a teacher and they can do all these things. It's tough to love them sometimes. But folks, that's what Jesus has called teachers to do. Oh, pray for them and pray for them hard. I'm telling you, there's some of them. The floor. See, let me give you background on this. I'm going to try to hurry. But I had a little thing of Doritos down by my desk. And one day I came in and said, I'd like those Doritos, Mark. I picked them up and the bag looked perfectly normal, but it was empty. And I looked on the back of the bag and there was this tiny little hole. This mouse, or alien, this mouse had gotten this little hole, had gone inside, had a feast, left the bag nearly untouched. Made me think I still had Doritos. I was ticked. So I was talking to, I can't remember how all this went down, but I was talking to Carter and Olivia, and they got me some traps. When I said traps, I wanted the kind that break the mouse's neck. I did. They brought me back the glue traps. And I know. I said, this is Carter and Olivia, and they want this thing to suffer. Let me tell you something about sin, folks, why you got to pray against their traps. Because it's off to get free. Same thing with humans. Sometimes they lose so much in the midst of trying to be free. Why don't we pray against their traps and their temptations? Why don't we pray against that? Why don't we pray against their talk? I'm talking grown. I'm talking middle school. I'm talking high school and college. I'm talking about little bitty babies back here in the back. I'm talking about, why aren't we praying against their talk? You say, well, what do you mean? Or praying about their talk? Folks, I'm going to tell you something. I can listen to it. I can be out there. And if it doesn't even, it can happen in the church, but very seldom inside. But maybe right outside those doors, there's some people in here with language like you ain't believe. And look, your kids, let me tell you something about those little ones. When they go into a classroom, whether Christian or public, when they go into a classroom and their buddies are saying it, they're walking around saying it. But you know where they learn it the most? Is in your home. Pray against their talk. Don't talk filth. Those kids are going to realize it's filth. I'm not going to go into the story in depth, but I remember when I first got here. Guys, in September, it'd be 8 years. When I first got here, there were particular words that were not curse words that Chet and Kelly would not let their kids say. Okay? So I'm not going to go, but there were words, okay, you couldn't say but.